everyone. Welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. I want to thank you for joining us today. And as always, I'm Brian Doyle.
I'm Tim McNeil.
And I'm Rob.
And we
With
love
2 Ps.
Rob.
With 2 Ps. With 2 Ps.
Every time it's different. Every single time.
We weren't
I'm
sure
like
if
The Simpsons.
we're not sure these days when Rob's going to show, when he doesn't. He's always, he's been a late game scratch a couple times lately. And, we're happy to see you, Rob.
It's happy to be here. I'm happy to be here, guys.
But, we're now winding in on going down to IT Nation for those of us that are going down, and we're getting pretty excited as the clock ticks to that. So if you guys are listeners, let us know if you're coming down to IT Nation. We'd love to catch up with you. We may even be doing some spot live chats while we're down there. So come seek us out. But today, as I always like to say, nobody's here to listen to us talk. They're here for our guest, and I want to welcome Ian Garrett from Phalanx to the show today. Ian is a fellow Pitch It cohort pal, so Phalanx was part of that as well, and we want to welcome Ian in to talk to us a little bit about data loss protection and why it matters.
Welcome, sir.
Yeah.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So, Ian, we love to kick things off first about learning a little bit about you. Maybe tell us a little bit about your background, how you ended up in IT and cybersecurity more specifically, and a little bit about Phalanx.
Yeah, so an unsurprising start to my cyber exposure was back in college. Went to West Point, which is the United States Military Academy.
A fellow Army guy.
Yeah.
Hey, you and Rob are going to hit it off right away.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I was doing computer science. But what was interesting was that we had a lot of professors that were doing cyber stuff in the Army. They'd come and teach for a couple of years and they go back. And I actually got I don't want to say picked up maybe, but I was 19. The DoD just released the policy that any USB devices, like USB ports, have to be shut down because you can't use USB devices. And then so naturally, being 19, I said, well, what can you do with the USB that makes the DoD want to shut down USB ports? So ended up creating a nice little tool using USBs that would essentially bypass access to devices as long as you had physical access. And so I was like, oh, that's fun. And I guess that flags something because the network up there is part of the DoDIN, which if you do anything that's fun on there might cause some issues. So I guess that flags somebody. But luckily some of the professors were like, oh, this is a skill set that you're gonna be able to use later when you're in the Army. So yeah, after that, commissioned into the Army as a cyber officer, mostly focused on offensive cyber operations. So really just got to do a lot more of the fun that I was already doing. Left active duty, went into a PhD program, also focused in cyber, but this case also with an AI flavor to it. And then was working as a defense contractor as a mix of program management, data science, software engineering, kind of a mix there. And then really when we saw 2020, when everyone went remote, I always said that the cyber industry had duct tape over it, trying to hold together a perimeter-based security solution. And it was already dying, but 2020 is pretty much where the remnants of it didn't work anymore. As obviously we have the remote, the hybrid, we got SaaS applications, cloud computing. It's like, all right, we got to figure out a new way to do this. So for us, we're like, let's try to bring identity-based security to the data security realm.
And that's, it's a critical function too, right? Because, as we're seeing all these new emerging cyber threats and there's a lot of new challenges coming out there, one of the more overlooked areas is pure data loss prevention, right? Everybody's encrypting disk, and that's certainly a big part of it, but there's a number of different ways that files are vulnerable. And I think the SMB marketplace and the MSP marketplace is just starting to kind of really understand that concept and start looking at ways to implement that. How are you seeing the community receiving the product thus far?
Yeah, so for ours, it's been great because the traditional data loss prevention solutions out there you can really think of them as like monitoring solutions.
Yeah.
So you pretty much come up with a bunch of rules and policies that say data should do this, data shouldn't do that. The only issue is a traditional solution really is something that should be the final security solution you put in that it's capturing it as the data is already walking out the door. So if there's any holes in your policy, then it's, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
So but what key point with that is the rules and policies. So from an enterprise perspective, you have a security team, you have people you can hire to just sit in there. Their job is to deploy the thing. Their job is to maintain the thing. When you're an MSP or an SMB and your SMB client, like you don't have, if you're spending that many hours per client, it's not going to work for your business model. So what we found talking to a number of MSPs is that they, even with the in-house Microsoft DLP, they're just like, we just can't do it. There's too much time taken. We just can't do it. We got to rely on these more rudimentary disk encryption as our best shot.
Yeah.
So us to be a DLP solution that doesn't require rules and policies, that is low configuration. It deals, we focus on the identity of the users that we pull right out of the existing identity that's already set up. And then we leverage the individualized encryption. So that's how we tackle DLP in a way that's way different than the traditional version of it. But because of that, we're something that someone can set up in less than a day and manage with minutes per week.
So, maybe let's take a step back. We got a little deep into the product itself, but, what are some of the things that are driving the need for DLP? Like, what are some of the tactical things that an MSP may have seen, but they're not realizing this is the solution that solves for it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to start is just looking at the attacks that are happening. I think 43% of attacks are on SMBs. And so pretty much the main security mechanism that people are using is just statistics. They're like, hopefully there's too many SMBs out there that it's not going to be me, which is wild to think about from a security perspective, is that's the strategy. So there's no lack of need for any kind of data security in general, and that's why it's not an either or. You shouldn't be doing disk drive encryption or data loss prevention or your email or network security. It really should be a defense in depth, where you take all your cyber assets and make sure you map something to each of those. Because I think a lot of times people say, I have a suite of cyber tools and here you go, and then you end up over securing one asset significantly and under securing the others.
No, I'm glad you said defense in depth, because that's exactly where my mind was going with this. It's really part of a collection of strategies to really make sure you're protecting that data. But, from my seat and talking to a lot of the MSPs that I speak to on a daily, it's not one that most have started really implementing in earnest. And then some of the older technologies that they've implemented, I've seen, going back to what you said about policies. Matter of fact, I worked with a mid-tier, almost enterprise organization as one of our customers back when I was an MSP. And their biggest challenge was they couldn't keep up with adding the keywords that they were generating to the policy file. This was a large media outlet, and one of their biggest things was not letting, the next greatest thing they were doing, or the next news topic that they were going to get out there, if they were getting a chance to break it, and they couldn't keep up with the DLP process of doing that. Is that something that Phalanx could potentially solve for?
100%. Again, our approach takes out the human in the loop, and
which is important.
That's the weakest link.
The human, that was what we founded it on, was the fact that most attacks, if not all attacks at this point, like, hackers aren't remotely accessing your machine without people accidentally letting them in. So, I mean, at the end of the day, if you can solve for the human in the loop issue, because I mean, even if you think about, I always come from the attacker's perspective, because that's where my background's from. Right now, with the rise of additional automation tools, the rise of you're seeing all the generative AI buzzword stuff, but ultimately that just means attackers can adapt faster. And then so what that really means is, if your defense relies on a human to adapt faster than automation, you're already in a losing battle, because this is impossible. So what we built was like, let's get rid of all the people as much as possible, and let's just focus on automation.
So what do you mean when you say, AI is really, seeping in here now? Like, what's going on with that?
Yeah, so easy example is through phishing. So there was just a recent research report by I think it was the IBM X-Force, and they ran a test to see the efficacy of AI-generated phishing attacks and human-generated phishing attacks. And I want to say the AI-generated phishing attacks generated about 11% click-through rate, with the human-generated being 14%. So the humans obviously did slightly better, but given that the AI one took zero expertise and was quickly generated, is important because if you can do that repeatedly, because I mean, phishing attacks especially, it's all about being able to adapt to, I guess it's like sales. If you do too much of what worked before, it's not going to keep working in the future. So you have to keep adapting to be a fisherman. But and then again, so if you're a human sitting there, if you have to screen every single one to be like, this is real, this is not real, then you're going to always lose on that first touch because the attacker is always going to keep adapting, and then the AI just makes it easier to do that piece of it.
So real quick, I want to take a lot of steps back here. So you were on the offensive side when you were in the military. So you were the guy trying to like get into all the bad guys stuff. Is that what you were saying?
Right. So at my focus was more on building applications to support the subversion of defenses. I guess.
Got it. Yeah. So breaking into the bad guy stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow, that's pretty cool, man.
That is cool.
I like that.
Cool.
And you did it for 5 years. You were 5+3, or?
Yeah. So I did 5 years active. Currently actually a reservist with US Cybercom.
Okay.
As well, so it's been another 5 years of that.
Wow, very neat.
Yeah, very cool.
Well, thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you very much. You too.
Rob jumped out of planes. They didn't put him in front of any of the cool technology. They said this guy can jump. That's where his floor
I jumped out of planes and shot big things.
They had computers, but they're like, no, this guy can't.
Nope, that's not for you.
Even though I spent most of it on the computer, the Army did not save my knee or my back. I'm still absolutely in pain all the time. You just can't get away from it.
That's fantastic.
So you had mentioned, sorry.
No, please go, Tim.
Before that, you kind of specialized, obviously, on the security and the AI side. I'm curious to know how, AI is something that we've been talking about at length recently. I mean, how can you incorporate that to make you better, right? We know how people can use it for maybe the bad side, like we just talked about. How can you incorporate that, or how do you incorporate that to make it better for you and your clients?
Yeah, so for us, it's having had a lot of the AI experience from personally through, again, a lot of my PhD research is focused in that.
Yeah.
And that was prior to the wave. But so kind of understanding kind of that side of it and not necessarily the hype side of it that we're seeing now.
Yeah.
I think of it in a different perspective, and that's, for us, it's the end state first, and then how do we get to the end state? So that's why you'll hear me say a lot about automation rather than just AI or ML, because a lot of times that's all we need, right? We don't need necessarily an AI system to do something. We just need the automation there. So where we find any kind of AI solutions to be the best benefit to us is, again, looking at the end state is which is, for us, the whole mission is how do we remove humans from the loop as much as possible. And the only time that a human needs to interact with the system is as similar to their current existing way that they're interacting with their system. So again, from the end user standpoint, completely transparent. From the administration standpoint, the parts that you don't like, which is managing, is very easy. The parts that you do like, which is it's helping you get your job done, that's the only part you have to interact with. So from an AI perspective, that comes in two different flavors. So on the protect side, it is contextual scanning of documents to understand not just, and again, a lot of this can actually be done without AI. It's just kind of pattern matching. So it's like, hey, is it PI? Is that a social security number that looks like 3 digits dash 2 digits dash 4 digits? We think it's PII. That's easy. What becomes less easy is trade secrets, CUI from the government data, things like that, where it's like, this is proprietary data. That's harder to just pattern match, but that's something that we believe, us bringing in AI will help us do, because then you could say, put that under the sensitive data blanket, and just instead of it being, these buckets is where you're encrypting, or these type of files you just say auto encrypt my sensitive data no matter what, and make sure the decryption is easy. And that's where we think AI is going to come big for us on that front. And then the other side is the predictive analytics. So right now we have an actual map that you can see where across the world people are accessing your data. US, it goes down to the county level. But where we're putting a lot of emphasis.
Wait, what? What did you just say, Ian? Say that again. You just blew over something really cool.
We actually showcased this. We launched it on stage at TechCrunch Disrupt this year.
Really?
We have a map of the world on our dashboard, and that shows you where in the world anyone's accessing your corporate data. And in the US, it goes down to the county level.
What?
So if you look at our map, it's funny because you can see all the conferences I go to, all the different states.
Really?
Like, yeah, it's a little Christmas tree.
That is pretty cool.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because ultimately that's the biggest challenge too. It's like, we would talk about the encryption a lot, but the reality is, for unstructured data in your documents, where does that
Well,
stuff
I mean, most of us have distributed workforces, right? So, you're already talking about that. The old domain, directory infrastructure really doesn't exist anymore for most of us.
Like, people have bring your own devices, like, so we wanted to solve for that problem. And not just to have the raw data. The raw data is cool, but we wanted then to say, hey, here's actionable steps. Well, if we want to quantify the cyber risk associated with that, which most people have no idea, like how much data even exists, like let alone how much risk is involved. But for 2 actionable steps, like that's where we're saying we bring value on day one, because we're saying there's data here. This is what's risky about the data. Hey, this one guy's got 10,000 files that he hasn't touched in 7 years. That's pretty risky. Well, you should do something about that. And then here's things you can do to de-risk this, de-risk your organization. And that's again where the AI, we'll just have better and better predictive analytics on how to better take steps to better de-risk your organization.
You just said a couple of things there that I want to bring forward again as well. A lot of our audience are sales professionals, business development professionals, and marketing professionals. And you just got to what my next question was a little bit right there, which is, how does somebody that might not know much about this technology position it? But I think right there, you just shared understanding the risk you have and how many files might actually be, potentially out there at risk, and then what the de-risk steps are 2 things that I think, the audience should really listen to if you really want to get into that conversation and say, do you know where your unstructured data lives? Do you know where it's being accessed? And do you know how much of it is vulnerable to loss? And is that kind of how the approach model you're seeing your teams going? And I don't mean to boil it down so simply. Certainly there might be other things, but my mind was like, where do you position this with a customer who might not know or care, right? Or think they don't care, at least perceptionally.
Right. I mean, there's a couple different flavors. Obviously, if they're in a regulated industry, most likely the solutions that they're using are cumbersome on their end.
Yep.
And obviously no MSP wants to get in the way of their customer getting a job done. So we're already leagues above, the status quo in that standpoint. But that other piece, as you mentioned, is a huge benefit. We actually have some of our MSP customers asking us to add additional analytics into our dashboard that they hook into their dashboard that they show their customers. So it's not just us providing data to our MSP customers, it's they are enabling their own businesses by saying, hey customer, look at all this, look at what we're doing, all this protection that we're doing, and look what's happening under the, it gives them a sense of bringing value to their customers.
So Ian, that means you have API access that you can provide to them?
Yes, 100%.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, cool. I mean, it's we built the whole thing with it was very early stages of product development. We started hooking in with MSPs, and we were like, hey, we know we're not there yet, but the
Yeah.
easiest time to build something is at the beginning. So at least the easy way to bake in the design is at the beginning. So we're like, what do we need to do now to make sure that we're MSP friendly later? And that was like, hey, they're like, if you don't have multi-tenancy, and if I gotta log in every time for every customer, like there's no way. So multi-tenancy, and they're like, oh, also if like you don't hook into our identity access managers right up the bat, then no way. And another one was like, if I can't access all that information via API, then I have a lot of tools that are doing a lot of cool things, and I would love to get your data into those tools. But if I have to only use your dashboard, then no way. So we made sure that we implemented all that in Plus.
Beautiful. Well, I know we're getting near the end of our time today. Ian, any closing thoughts you want to share? Anything you wanted to cover that we haven't hit upon today?
I mean, the just want to double stomp the fact that we're really excited to now be focused primarily on the MSP market as the area that we're really trying to serve, because at the end of the day we found that there are a lot of DLPs out for enterprise, there are a lot of DLPs out for the mid-market, but there are no DLPs for the SMBs, and at least ones that can be easily managed. So we're always looking for additional partners that we can help enable their businesses, and we want to learn from them as well. To again, the whole thing is that we want to make sure our platform is the platform for MSPs when it comes to data loss prevention.
Awesome.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
Well,
very cool.
Ian, we really appreciate you joining us here today. For anybody that is looking to get in touch with him, we will have all of his LinkedIn information on our podcast. So remember, this episode will be up on mspbusinessschool.com and anywhere that you get your podcast, to include YouTube. So please go there, check it out, like, subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Fellas, I really appreciate it today. Thank you for your service, Ian. Catch you guys next time.
Thanks,
you very
Ian.
much. Thanks for
Appreciate you
having me.
joining us.
Yeah.